For 7 long years, the people of Rose Creek laughed whenever they saw Eva Carter step out of the rusty old Caravan parked beside the abandoned gas station at the edge of town. Children rode past on bicycles, calling her the trailer ghost. Teenagers secretly filmed her carrying groceries in torn paper bags, and even the adults lowered their voices whenever she walked into a store, whispering that she had probably lost her mind years ago. At 72 years old, Eva had become nothing more than a sad little rumor buried inside a forgotten desert town. Nobody cared that she once had a beautiful home. Nobody cared that she had spent 45 years beside the same man. And nobody cared that the old Caravan she slept inside every night was the only thing she had left after her own son threw her out like unwanted furniture. But on one cold autumn morning, everything changed. 3 black SUVs rolled slowly into Rose Creek just after sunrise, stopping directly in front of Eva's rusty Caravan while the entire town watched in confusion. Men wearing expensive suits stepped out beside camera crews and security guards. Then, a famous Hollywood director looked at the trembling old woman standing beside the trailer and quietly asked, "Eva Carter, do you still have the final reel?" In that moment, the same people who had mocked her for years suddenly realized the lonely old woman living in the broken Caravan had been protecting a secret worth millions the entire time. Eva stood frozen beside the Caravan as the black SUVs reflected the pale morning sunlight across the dusty road. For a few seconds, nobody in town moved. The teenagers who had been laughing near the convenience store slowly lowered their phones. Sarah Green nearly dropped the coffee cup in her hands. Even Sheriff Andrew Hayes, who had spent years pretending not to notice the old woman living near the abandoned gas station, stared across the street with narrowed eyes. Rose Creek was the kind of town where nothing unusual ever happened. People talked about the weather, complained about bills, and repeated the same gossip every single day. But expensive Hollywood vehicles did not belong in a forgotten desert town like this. They especially did not belong outside Eva Carter's rusty Caravan. Eva instinctively tightened her grip around the old wool scarf hanging around her neck. It had once belonged to her husband Mac. The fabric was faded now, soft from decades of use, but she still wore it every morning no matter how hot the weather became. It was one of the few things she refused to part with. Her tired gray eyes moved nervously between the strangers stepping out of the SUVs. Their polished shoes sank slightly into the dirt as they approached her trailer, looking completely out of place against the cracked asphalt and rusted fuel pumps behind her. Then the older man in the dark suit stepped forward. "Eva Carter?" he asked gently. His voice carried none of the mockery she had grown used to hearing from the people in town. Eva hesitated before nodding once. The man's expression softened almost immediately, as though he had spent years searching for someone he never expected to actually find. "My name is Noah Bennett," he said quietly. "I believe you have something that belongs to Hollywood." The entire street fell silent. Sarah Green slowly stepped closer from across the road, pretending to adjust the flowers outside her shop while shamelessly listening. A pair of mechanics emerged from the auto garage nearby. Curtains shifted inside neighboring windows as people peeked outside. Within minutes, half the town seemed to be watching. Eva's hands trembled slightly. For a moment, she looked less like an old woman and more like someone carrying the weight of a memory too painful to reopen. "I think you should leave," she whispered. But Noah did not move. Instead, his eyes drifted toward the small Caravan behind her. The trailer looked like it could collapse during the next desert storm. Rust covered the sides. One window had been repaired with tape years ago. The tires were cracked from sitting too long under the unforgiving sun. Yet Noah stared at it with the kind of awe most people reserved for historical landmarks. "You kept it all these years," he murmured almost to himself. Eva swallowed hard. Behind her calm face, old memories were already beginning to claw their way back to the surface. Memories of film cameras, bright studio lights, long nights beside Mac, and the sound of music echoing through canyon walls almost 50 years ago. Memories she had spent years trying to bury beneath silence. Sheriff Andrew finally crossed the street. "Everything all right here?" he asked carefully, though his attention remained fixed on Noah and the camera crew standing behind him. Noah reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. The second Eva saw it, all the color drained from her face. It was a picture of her and Mac standing beside the very same caravan nearly 40 years earlier, both of them younger and smiling beneath massive desert cliffs. Written across the bottom corner in faded ink were the words, "Whispers of the Canyon Final Week of Production." Eva's breathing became shallow. The townspeople exchanged confused glances. Nobody in Rose Creek had ever seen that photograph before. Nobody had ever imagined the lonely old woman sleeping beside the abandoned gas station had once been connected to something far bigger than their tiny, forgotten town. That evening, Rose Creek no longer felt like the quiet little desert town it had always been. News traveled faster than the wind there, and by sunset, every diner booth, grocery aisle, and gas station conversation revolved around one thing: Eva Carter. People who had ignored her for years suddenly spoke her name with curiosity instead of pity. Some claimed she used to be an actress. Others swore she had stolen something valuable from Hollywood decades ago. A few even insisted the old woman living in the rusty caravan had secretly been rich the entire time. Eva heard none of it directly, but she could feel the town changing around her. For the first time in years, strangers slowed their cars when passing her trailer. People stared longer than usual. Some looked suspicious. Others looked almost afraid. Inside the caravan, Eva sat quietly at the small foldable table beneath the dim yellow light hanging from the ceiling. The old trailer creaked softly whenever desert wind brushed against its metal walls. Across from her sat Noah Bennett, carefully studying the cramped little space around him. The inside of the caravan felt frozen in another era. Old film canisters were stacked neatly inside wooden crates beneath the bed. Faded photographs covered one corner of the wall. A cracked piano melody box rested beside several handwritten notebooks tied together with string. Everything smelled faintly of dust, old paper, and cedar wood. Noah looked around slowly, almost emotionally. "You preserved all of this by yourself?" he asked. Eva nodded once while pouring hot tea into 2 chipped cups. "I promised Mac I would," she replied softly. For several seconds, Noah said nothing. He reached toward one of the photographs hanging near the window. It showed a younger Eva laughing beside a tall man with silver hair and round glasses, Mac Carter. Behind them stood massive cameras, lighting equipment, and the endless canyon cliffs stretching beneath a blazing orange sunset. Noah's voice lowered. "I grew up hearing stories about this film," he admitted. "People in Hollywood thought the final reels were destroyed after the fire." Eva's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "They were supposed to be," she whispered. Outside, headlights slowly passed by the caravan one after another. People were still driving past just to look at the place they had mocked for years. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah Green sat inside the local diner practically vibrating with excitement as she repeated the story to anyone willing to listen. "I'm telling you," she whispered loudly, leaning across the counter, "those men were real Hollywood people. Cameras, security, expensive suits, the whole thing." The waitress rolled her eyes. "And all this time she was living out there like a homeless woman?" Sarah glanced nervously toward the diner windows. "Well, maybe she wanted to hide." At the sheriff's office, Andy U. Hayes stared at the old photograph Noah had shown him earlier that day. Something about Eva's expression in the picture bothered him. It was not the smile of someone chasing fame or money. It looked more like someone protecting something precious, something painful. Back inside the caravan, Noah finally looked directly at Eva. "The studio wants to restore the film," he said carefully, "if the final reel still exists." Eva immediately shook her head before he could finish. "No." Her answer came faster than either of them expected. Noah paused. Eva slowly stood from the table and walked toward a small cabinet near the back of the trailer. After hesitating for several seconds, she opened it carefully and removed a small metal film container wrapped inside an old blanket. Even after all these years, her hand still trembled every time she touched it. Noah's eyes widened almost instantly. He knew exactly what he was looking at. The final reel. The missing piece of Whispers of the Canyon. The film Hollywood had searched for nearly 40 years. Eva held it against her chest protectively, almost like a mother shielding a child. "You don't understand," she whispered. "That film destroyed my husband." Silence filled the caravan. Outside, desert wind rattled softly against the metal walls, while distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the dark canyon horizon. For the first time since arriving in Rose Creek, Noah Bennett realized this story was not about a lost movie at all. It was about a woman who had spent nearly half her life guarding the ruins of the man she once loved. The next morning, Rose Creek woke up to chaos. By sunrise, news vans had already begun arriving from nearby cities. Reporters stood outside the diner, drinking burnt coffee, while cameramen pointed their lenses toward the lonely caravan beside the abandoned gas station. Nobody in town could remember the last time Rose Creek had appeared on television for anything other than a weather report. And in the center of it all sat Eva Carter, the same woman people had ignored for nearly a decade. Inside the caravan, Eva barely slept. She remained awake most of the night, listening to the wind scrape against the metal roof, while old memories refused to leave her alone. Every sound outside made her uneasy now. Every passing car reminded her that strangers suddenly cared about something she had spent years hiding. Across from her, the metal film canister still rested on the table exactly where she had left it. The final reel, the one thing Mac had begged her to protect. At around 8 in the morning, a soft knock came at the caravan door. Eva hesitated before opening it. To her surprise, it was Misa Miller from the library, nervously holding a paper bag in her hands. "I brought breakfast," she said awkwardly. "I figured you probably haven't eaten." Eva looked almost confused by the kindness. People in town rarely approached her unless they wanted to stare. Misa stepped inside carefully, immediately overwhelmed by the tiny caravan packed with pieces of another lifetime. Her eyes drifted across the film canisters, the handwritten music sheets, and dozens of old photographs scattered across the walls. Then she noticed one picture in particular. It showed Eva and Max standing beside a younger Noah Bennett on a film set decades earlier. Misa blinked in surprise. "You knew him back then?" Eva followed her gaze toward the photograph and smiled faintly for the first time in years. "He was just a nervous assistant director," she said softly, "always carrying too many notebooks." For a brief moment, warmth filled the cramped little trailer. The heavy tension seemed to disappear as Eva slowly began talking about the past, about the canyon shoots, about the endless music sessions at night, about Max sitting beside campfires with his little tape recorder while coyotes howled somewhere in the distance. Misa listened carefully, almost forgetting she was speaking to the lonely woman everyone in town had mocked for years. But outside, things were already beginning to change. A black luxury SUV pulled up beside the gas station. Adam Carter stepped out, wearing an expensive gray coat and dark sunglasses. The moment Sarah Green spotted him from across the street, she nearly ran into the diner to spread the news. "Her son's back," she whispered dramatically. "After all these years." Adam removed his sunglasses slowly while staring toward the caravan in disgust. Even now, after years apart, he looked embarrassed by it. Sheriff Andiu noticed him almost immediately. "What are you doing here, Adam?" he asked cautiously. Adam forced a smile. "I came to see my mother," but there was no warmth in his voice. Only calculation. Inside the caravan, Eva had not yet noticed the SUV outside. She sat quietly beside Misa while carefully unfolding one of Mac's old music sheets. The paper had yellowed with age, and several notes had faded almost beyond recognition. "Mac used to say music could keep memories alive forever," she whispered. Before Misa could respond, loud knocking suddenly shook the caravan door hard enough to rattle the windows. Eva froze instantly. Her face lost all color, because after 7 years of silence, she recognized that knock immediately. Adam. For several painful seconds, nobody moved. Then another knock came, louder this time. "Mom," Adam called from outside. "We need to talk." The warmth inside the caravan vanished completely. Misa looked nervously toward Eva, but Eva's eyes remained fixed on the floor. Her hands trembled slightly around the old sheet music as memories of that terrible night years earlier came rushing back all at once. Adam shouting, lawyers waiting in the living room, strangers carrying furniture out of her house while she stood helpless beside the front door clutching one small suitcase. She had not heard her son's voice in almost 7 years, and somehow it still hurt exactly the same. Eva could barely bring herself to open the door. For a moment, she simply stood there frozen beside the tiny kitchen counter, staring at the thin metal frame of the caravan while Adam waited outside, like a ghost from another life. Misa quietly stepped back, sensing the fear spreading across the old woman's face. Then, the knocking came again, harder this time. "Mom," Adam said impatiently, "I know you're in there." Eva slowly closed her eyes. 7 years ago, she had once waited for her son to come back with regret in his heart. She used to imagine him apologizing, hugging her, telling her he had made a terrible mistake. But standing there now, listening to the cold sharpness in his voice, she realized something painful. Adam had not returned because he missed her. He returned because he smelled money. Finally, Eva unlocked the caravan door. Adam stepped inside without waiting for permission, instantly wrinkling his nose at the cramped interior. The tiny trailer suddenly felt even smaller with him standing there. His expensive coat brushed against hanging film reels as he looked around with visible discomfort. "So this is how you've been living," he muttered. Eva remained silent. Adam's eyes quickly landed on Noah Bennett's business card sitting beside the table. That was all the confirmation he needed. The rumors were true. Hollywood really was involved. His entire attitude shifted almost instantly. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "looks like things are finally turning around for you." Misa watched him carefully from the corner of the caravan. Something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. There was no guilt in his face, no sadness, no shame for abandoning his own mother, only greed. Adam casually walked deeper into the trailer until he noticed the metal film canister resting near the bed. His expression changed immediately. "That's it, isn't it?" he asked quietly. Eva stepped forward at once, placing herself between Adam and the reel. The movement alone told him everything. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Outside, distant reporters could already be heard gathering near the road. Adam slowly removed his sunglasses. "You have any idea what this could be worth?" he asked. Eva's tired eyes filled with disappointment more than anger. "That's the first thing you say to me after 7 years?" Adam looked away briefly, annoyed by the question. "Mom, I'm trying to help you." "No," Eva whispered softly. "You're trying to help yourself." The silence that followed felt unbearable. Misa could practically feel decades of pain sitting between them. Adam finally sighed and rubbed his forehead impatiently. "You don't understand how these things work," he said. "Studios, contracts, media people will take advantage of you." Eva almost laughed at the irony, because the only person who had truly taken advantage of her was standing right in front of her. Adam stepped closer. "We're family," he continued carefully. "Whatever happens with the film, we should handle it together." Eva stared at him quietly. Then, with heartbreaking calmness, she asked, "Did you think about family when you sold my house?" Adam's jaw tightened instantly. "You agreed to that." "I agreed, because you said you'd take care of me. You had the trailer." The second those words left his mouth, even Adam seemed to realize how cruel they sounded. Misa looked down uncomfortably. Eva said nothing for several seconds. Then she slowly turned toward the tiny window beside the sink, staring out at the dusty desert road where she had spent countless nights completely alone. "You know what hurt the most?" she asked quietly. Adam crossed his arms. "What?" Eva's voice trembled slightly now. "Not losing the house." She swallowed hard before continuing. "It was realizing my own son could sleep peacefully while his mother spent winter nights inside a freezing trailer." For the first time since entering the caravan, Adam could not look directly at her. But before either of them could say another word, chaos suddenly erupted outside. Car doors slammed, voices shouted, camera flashes exploded through the Caravan windows. Noah Bennett hurried toward the trailer while Sheriff Andrew tried to push reporters back from the entrance. "Eva!" Noah shouted urgently. "The studio leaked the story." Adam's eyes widened. Within hours, national media had discovered that the legendary missing reel of Whispers of the Canyon still existed. And now the entire country wanted it. That night, Eva Carter sat alone inside the Caravan, while the world outside her tiny windows spiraled into madness. News vans lined both sides of the dusty road. Bright camera lights swept across the abandoned gas station, like searchlights hunting for something hidden in the dark. Reporters shouted questions every time someone walked near the trailer. Strangers had begun arriving from neighboring towns just to catch a glimpse of the old woman everyone suddenly cared about. But inside the Caravan, none of it felt real to Eva. She sat quietly at the small table, holding Mac's old scarf against her chest, while the final film reel rested beside her under the dim yellow light. For years, this tiny trailer had been invisible. Now it felt like the entire world was clawing at its walls. A soft knock interrupted the silence. This time, it was Noah. When Eva opened the door, she immediately noticed how exhausted he looked. His tie hung loose around his neck, and deep worry sat behind his normally calm eyes. "The studio wants the reel tonight," he admitted carefully. "They're offering millions." Eva looked down at the metal canister in silence. Millions. The word meant almost nothing to her anymore. Noah stepped further inside and lowered his voice. "But that's not why I came." Eva slowly looked at him. Noah reached into his coat and carefully placed a faded envelope on the table. "I found this in the studio archives this morning." Eva's hands trembled the moment she saw Mac's handwriting across the front. For Eva, she could barely breathe as she opened it. Inside was a letter written nearly 40 years earlier. The paper shook in her hands while she read. "If you're reading this, it means they finally found the reel. I know you, Eva. You probably spent years protecting it when you should have been protecting yourself. But if the world ever sees this film again, I need them to know the truth. None of it would have existed without you. Every melody I wrote, every scene we survived, every beautiful thing people will someday see on that screen, it lived because you stayed beside me when everyone else walked away. Promise me one thing. When the time comes, don't hide anymore." By the time Eva reached the final line, tears were already streaming down her face. For years, she had convinced herself she was preserving the film for Mac. But deep down, she realized something painful. She had also been hiding inside the memory of him. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert sky. Noah gently placed a hand on the table. "The premiere is tomorrow night," he said softly. "You deserve to be there." The following evening, Rose Creek looked completely transformed. Massive lights illuminated the center of town. A temporary outdoor theater had been built beside the old canyon cliffs where Whispers of the Canyon was originally filmed decades ago. Hundreds of people filled the rows of chairs beneath the night sky, while reporters crowded every corner. And for the first time in years, Eva Carter was no longer invisible. As Noah escorted her toward the screening area, the crowd slowly fell silent. People stared at the elderly woman who had once slept unnoticed beside an abandoned gas station. Sarah Green stood near the front row, with tears already filling her eyes. Sheriff Andrew removed his hat respectfully as Eva passed. Even Misa looked overwhelmed watching the fragile old woman step beneath the glowing lights. Then, Eva noticed Adam standing near the back of the crowd. Alone. No reporters surrounded him now. No confidence remained on his face. He simply stood there watching his mother in silence, finally realizing the woman he discarded years ago had become the heart of a story far greater than anything money could buy. The film began. For nearly 2 hours, the canyon cliffs filled the giant screen, while Mac's haunting music echoed beneath the desert stars. The audience laughed, cried, and sat speechless through scenes Hollywood believed had been music forever. And throughout the entire film, Eva quietly wept beside Noah, Not because of fame, not because of the attention, but because after nearly 40 years, she could finally hear Mac's music alive again. Then the final scene faded to black. The credits began rolling slowly across the screen. Original score by Eva Carter. The audience applauded immediately. But then another line appeared. Film preserved by Eva Carter. For a brief second, complete silence swept through the canyon. Then, every single person rose to their feet. The applause thundered through the desert night, louder than Eva had ever heard in her life. People cried openly. Reporters lowered their cameras. Even strangers in the crowd wiped tears from their faces while looking toward the elderly woman standing beneath the soft golden lights. Eva covered her mouth as emotion overwhelmed her completely. All those years alone inside the freezing caravan, all those nights wondering if she had been forgotten, suddenly they no longer felt meaningless. Across the crowd, Adam slowly lowered his head, because for the first time in his life, he finally understood something devastating. His mother had never been weak. She had simply spent her entire life protecting beauty in a world too selfish to notice it. Several months Lim's eyes widened. Within hours, national media had discovered that the legendary missing reel of Whispers of the Canyon still existed. And now the entire country wanted it. That night, Eva Carter sat alone inside the caravan while the world outside her tiny windows spiraled into madness. News vans lined both sides of the dusty road. Bright camera lights swept across the abandoned gas station like searchlights hunting for something hidden in the dark. Reporters shouted questions every time someone walked near the trailer. Strangers had begun arriving from neighboring towns just to catch a glimpse of the old woman everyone suddenly cared about. But inside the caravan, none of it felt real to Eva. She sat quietly at the small table, holding Mac's old scarf against her chest, while the final film reel rested beside her under the dim yellow light. For years, this tiny trailer had been invisible. Now it felt like the entire world was clawing at its walls. A soft knock interrupted the silence. This time, it was Noah. When Eva opened the door, she immediately noticed how exhausted he looked. His tie hung later. The rusty caravan still sat beside the old gas station. But now, children gathered there every weekend, beneath strings of warm hanging lights, while classic films played against a giant outdoor screen built beside the desert cliffs. Eva refused every offer to sell the trailer, even after wealthy collectors offered fortunes for it. Instead, she transformed it into a small community cinema dedicated to forgotten artists and lost stories. And every evening, just before sunset, Eva would place Mac's old scarf around her shoulders, sit quietly beneath the canyon sky, and listen as laughter, music, and film projector reels filled the desert air once again. The lonely old woman the town once mocked had not been hiding from the world after all. She had simply been waiting for the world to finally remember her. Before you leave tonight, there's something important I hope this story reminds all of us. The world moves so fast that sometimes we stop noticing the people quietly hurting right beside us. We see an old woman living alone in a rusty trailer, a tired man sitting silently on a park bench, or someone forgotten by their own family. And without knowing their story, we assume they no longer matter. But stories like Eva Carter's remind us that every person carries a history deeper than we can imagine. Some people survive betrayal without ever losing their kindness. Some people protect beauty even when the world gives them nothing in return. And sometimes, the strongest souls are the ones suffering in complete silence while everyone else looks away. Here on Humanity Rewritten, we tell emotional stories about resilience, heartbreak, redemption, family betrayal, second chances, and the quiet kind of courage that often goes unnoticed in everyday life. These are stories about ordinary people pushed to their lowest moments, only to rise again in ways nobody expected. Because deep down, we all want to believe that kindness still matters, that justice can still arrive even after years of pain, and that it's never too late for someone's life to change. If Eva's journey moved you in any way tonight, we would truly love for you to become part of this growing community by subscribing to the channel. Every subscription helps us continue bringing meaningful stories like this to life. And it tells YouTube that emotional storytelling still has a place in this world filled with noise and negativity. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful journey of hope, survival, and late life justice. And now, before the screen fades to black, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments below, what moment in Eva Carter's story touched your heart the most? Was it the years she spent protecting Mac's final film reel? The moment Hollywood finally recognized her? Or the painful realization that the people we overlook are sometimes carrying the most extraordinary stories of all? We read every comment carefully, and your thoughts truly mean more to this channel than you know. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight. Thank you for listening to Eva's story. And wherever you are in the world right now, never forget this. Sometimes, the people abandoned by everyone else are the very people holding the last pieces of beauty left in this world. Until next time, this is Humanity Rewritten.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe my channel.